My name is Brendan, and I'll be explaining the different meanings of the words parody and satire, why some jurisdictions differentiate between the two in relation to copyright infringement, and whether this distinction is relevant in Australia. While it is risky nowadays to make generalizations or assumptions, when most people hear the words parody or satire, they tend to associate these terms with the Batuta Advocate or the Onion. These terms do, however, differ in meaning, and it is important to understand these differences. As parody and satire are not defined in Australian copyright law, let's have a look at how the Americans define it. In the US, parody is regarded as making fun of the source material or subject matter that it depicts. Satire, on the other hand, is defined as using the source material to make a general claim about society. Some examples of parody include the popular movie series Austin Powers, which is a spoof on James Bond movies. Another example of a parody is the movie series Scary Movie, which is a more general spoof on horror movies. An example of satire, on the other hand, is the late-night talk show The Colbert Report, and even Mark Twain's classic book Life on the Mississippi. Political satire is renowned to be one of the most common and most significant forms of satire in the contemporary world. If the distinction is still unclear to anyone, another way of looking at parody and satire is that parody is inward-looking, whereas satire is outward-looking. In the US, the exception to copyright infringement is known as fair use, which means that a parody or satire could be exempted if it falls within the bracket of fair use. Parody and satire are both permissible under fair use, but it is much more difficult to establish that a satirical use is fair. The US is more concerned if whether the defendant is making fun of the source material itself, or whether they are making a more general and broader point about society as a whole. Satire is viewed by many people as something that is negative and unbalanced in nature. One of the main characteristics of satire include exaggeration for effect, but it can be seen as nasty, harmful, and grotesquely abusive to some. However, this is not the primary reason as to why satire is difficult to fall within the fair use exception. The main argument is that a person does not need to strictly use the copyright material itself to make their satirical point, whereas with parody, the copyrighted material is usually the most important aspect. Even though Australia has a reputation of being laid back in nature, it did not actually have a defence of fair dealing for parody or satire until 2006. In Australian copyright law, making something funny from another person's copyrighted material is not sufficient to rely on the parody and satire exception. The use must be part of some commentary on the material or some broader aspect of society. Within this defence, however, there is no set distinction between parody or satire. This is one of the few instances where Australian law is more generous to users than US law. As the parody and satire exception is a very new defence within Australia, it will be interesting to see how the courts will classify each term. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something from today's video.